Hello and welcome. Today, we are going to break down a really fascinating document called Homeopathy for Bad Habits. It takes a look at our struggles, things like smoking, overeating, drinking, from a totally different angle, and explores a pretty unique approach to breaking them.
And really, this question is the key to the whole thing. The document asks us to step back and think, what if the habits we're fighting aren't the real problem? What if they're just a sign of something much deeper going on?
All right, so first up, we've got to talk about this core idea. The document basically frames these addictive behaviors not as some kind of personal failing, but as a symptom. But a symptom of what, you ask? Well, here's the thing. The idea is that behaviors like drinking too much or craving certain foods are just temporary fixes. They're a way to kind of self-medicate, to numb some underlying pain that feels, well, too overwhelming to face head-on. The habit becomes a coping mechanism. And, framing it that way as a symptom instead of a failure, well, that can really open the door to a much more compassionate way of looking at ourselves and our struggles. And to really nail this point home, the document includes this great quote from George Vithoulkas. It perfectly captures the holistic view of health that this whole approach is built on. It suggests that being truly well isn't just about your body. It's about finding balance across the board, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Okay, so before we can even get to the solutions the document talks about, we need a quick crash course on the three main principles of homeopathy that it lays out. Okay. First, there's the law of similars, and the idea is pretty simple, actually. Like cures like. So you take a substance that would cause certain symptoms in a healthy person, and you use it to treat a sick person who's already showing those same symptoms. Next up, we have the law of the infinitesimal dose. Now, this one might sound a little backward at first. It's a key idea in homeopathy, where remedies are diluted again and again and again, but get this. The belief is that this repeated dilution actually increases the remedy's power. And that brings us to the third piece of the puzzle, the holistic model. This is the idea that an illness isn't just some generic thing. No, it's unique to each person. So treatment shouldn't just target the symptoms. It needs to look at the whole person, their mind, their emotions, their body, the whole shebang. So, with those rules in our back pocket, the document gets into something called constitutional remedies. It suggests that certain personality types, which are often shaped by our life experiences, are actually connected to specific addictive behaviors. So the thinking is, the stuff we go through in life can knock us off balance emotionally, right? And so a specific homeopathic remedy is chosen to match that entire personality profile, not just the craving itself. The source lays out some pretty fascinating examples of these personality types. So let's look at a few examples from the document. They're almost like little character sketches. For instance, the Nux vomica type is described as driven, a workaholic, maybe a bit angry and prone to stomach problems. They're linked to alcohol and stimulants. Then you have Metarrhenium, which is called the sex, drugs, and rock and roll personality, someone who lives in extremes. And there's Arsenicum album, which is for the perfectionist, the organizing fanatic who's terrified of dying and might turn to stimulants or smoking to keep going. All right, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit because the document talks about a totally different kind of remedy. It's called a totopathic remedy, and it's made from the actual substance a person is trying to stop using. So let's be super clear on the difference here. While the law of similars uses a like or similar substance, topopathy uses the exact same substance. For example, you might make a potentized version of a prescription drug to help someone wean off of it. The document even gives a step-by-step guide on how to create one. You start by crushing and dissolving the substance. Then you begin a series of dilutions. You save just 10 drops, refill the bottle with water, and then shake it really hard 100 times. In homeopathy, that shaking is called succussing. You just repeat that whole process over and over to get to the potency you want. Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this actually apply to specific bad habits? Well, the source gives all these lists of remedies for common cravings, and each one is linked to a very particular emotional or physical state. Take smoking, for instance. The document mentions caladium for just the general craving for tobacco, but it gets way more specific. It suggests thuja for someone who has a strong oral fixation, always needing something in their mouth, or staphysagria for a person whose smoking is tied to feeling frustrated or being in a tough, abusive relationship. And it's the same for alcohol. We see nux vomica pop up again for that intense type A person. But then there's lachesis for someone who gets super talkative and maybe jealous, or sulfuricum acid, which the document says can be used as a palliative, basically a remedy to help manage the cravings and buy some time while the deeper work gets done. And this pattern holds for food cravings too. The document connects a craving for sugar and chocolate, which might be addressed by argentum nitricum, to underlying anxiety. A huge desire for salty things, addressed by natrum muriaticum, is linked to grief and sadness, and it even gets as specific as colibichachromicum for beer cravings.
Okay, we're almost at the end, but before we go any further, it is super important that we share a disclaimer that comes directly from the source document itself.
The document says, and I quote, "This information is for educational purposes and not meant to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. Always seek the advice of your healthcare professional. And, of course, we're presenting this information to you for that exact same educational purpose."
So when you put all the specific remedies aside, the document really leaves us with this one big provocative thought. It encourages us to shift our focus away from just fighting the habit itself, and instead to get curious about the emotional pain that might be driving it in the first place. It makes you ask, does the why behind our habits matter more than the what? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.